Hi. So about 24 hours ago, I said that I no longer supported Israel, which is actually something that's been true for a long time. I would say I became fully supportive of Palestinian rights and BDS about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And even before that, I was just pretty much not supportive of anything that the Israeli government and the was doing for quite some time. Definitely, I would say, you know, definitely in 2014. Although, to be honest, like it was somewhat waffly because I sort of like the idea of having a Jewish state where I could just go and be Jewish. But I kind of realized that there's no middle ground there. That it's just all bad. And so this is something that I've been discussing a lot with a lot of people on mostly Twitter and in private life, but it's not something I really did on Facebook or Instagram because like I didn't really care about those things. But about 2 weeks ago, my Twitter handle got suspended for reasons that I'm still not 100% sure, which is fine because Twitter sucks. But I kind of said it on Instagram and Facebook, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of people are coming at me, saying that you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what you're doing, you haven't read, you're not, taking both sides into account, which is kind of ridiculous because, I first went on a birthright trip when I was 21 in 2005. So this is, during the disengagement or right before. This was like June. I think disengagement was like in August of 2005. I was sort of taken by it, which was my fault. I shouldn't have. But I was very much in it for a long time. I went to pro-Israel events, talks by IDF speakers. I knew many Israelis. You would hear stories. I worked at a B'nai Akiva camp in 2007. I unfortunately marched in the Israel Day Parade in also 2007. A friend brought me along. I staffed a birthright trip for disabled people in 2010. I was in yeshiva in Jerusalem for half a year in 2012. I went back in 2017. My entire social circle was mostly pro-Israel for pretty much my entire adult life from the time I could drink. Right? Yet every single time, I bring up criticisms of Israel or how I really don't trust it anymore, the first thing people say to me is, do your research, do your homework, you're only doing one side. It's like they don't even wait to like hear what I know or how I do it because that doesn't matter. Um, they just don't want to hear. And there's sort of this gaslighting phenomenon where they kind of imply, well, if you just read these more books, if you just spent, X amount of months in Israel more, or you listen to these five people, or even brought up other issues, that somehow your critiques about the legitimacy of the state, the history of the state, and the current conditions under which it is reinforced violently and racistly, that somehow they would listen to that, and it's just not true. They don't want to hear you. And furthermore, if you knew absolutely nothing, if you had learned about Israel yesterday and you were spouting pro Israel talking points, they wouldn't ask you, what do you know? Where did you learn? Show your experience, show your scholarship, show your knowledge. They wouldn't because they don't actually care. It's not the point. They just don't want to hear you. They just don't. So, I could give another speech about why I no longer support Israel, and I probably will at some point, just not in this video. But it's upsetting because it's demeaning, it's degrading. They don't want to hear you. They don't want to hear Palestinian side or Palestinian stories or read Palestinian authors or read histories of decolonization or read histories of supremacy and white supremacy and imperialism, of how pro-Israel orgs have pumped probably hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into a propaganda industry that is rotting the Jewish world from the inside. and it's disgusting and I hate it. And that's just all. And I would rather you argue with me on the facts or just say, fuck you, I don't want to listen, than try this, well, you don't know, the media's fooling you, it's the New York Times, it's CNN. I don't watch CNN. I don't read the New York Times. I don't watch MSNBC. I read. I read stories. I read books. I read history. I read theory on decolonization and racism. I listen to other people's stories. And that conclusion did not come overnight. It didn't even come over a week or over a month or even over years. The suppression of the Palestinian people by Israel is an unequivocal wrong. There's no nuance to it. There's no context which would explain it or permit any sort of moral equivocation or delay, as I did. There's no excuse for the delay in my support of Palestinian rights. I'm ashamed of that and I will carry it to the grave. But I can't go back, so whatever, I'll only move forward. There's nothing. There's nothing you can say that would justify this. There's nothing you can do to explain it. And that's why they come up with these sort of defensive talking points which have nothing to do with the argument or the context or the well-being of the people. You know, it's New York Times, CNN, Media Lies. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have the right to talk about it because you haven't been there. You're not a Palestinian or an Israeli. It's all obfuscation. That's all it is. And I know, because every single talking point, almost every single talking point, I wouldn't say the more disgustingly racist ones I said, especially from a liberal Zionist point of view, I've heard and I've known, I believed at one point, some of them have come out of my mouth, unfortunately, but it's all wrong. And you can't try to convince me or anybody else that I'm dumb or I'm ignorant, because I'm not. I'm not. It's just wrong. That's it. You know, there's many other things you can say about what's going on and rockets and anti-Semitism, but none of that changes sort of the facts on the ground that the displacement and apartheid that Palestinians deal with is an unequivocal wrong, and that has first priority of the problems that need to be dealt with, above all else. Full stop.